Okay, welcome to Lab 8. Today we're going to do some administrative aspects to our Active Directory environment that we created last week. We're going to create some organizational units and some users and so on and so forth, so that we can see how the Active Directory users and computers should look in a real-world environment. So before you get started, you should power on your Windows server and log in as the administrator, and power on your Windows 10 computer. And you can be logged in as administrator on that if you want. It's fine, not a big deal. But we are going to create some new users to log in on that. So once your Windows server is up and running, we're going to go ahead and go to our Active Directory users and computers. Click on our Windows icon, click on Windows Administrative Tools, and come down here to Active Directory users and computers. Now, because we use this a lot from this point on, I'm just going to right click on this and I'm going to actually pin this to my taskbar. I'm also going to right click. Well, no, I'm not, because it's not going to let me make a shortcut there. And it doesn't let me make a shortcut there, so that's fine, not a big deal. But I'm going to pin that to my taskbar so that I can go to this more readily. So now that it's down here, I'm just going to click on this and open up our Windows Domain Controller Active Directory users and computers. So in here, again, we saw a little bit of this last module. We have our domain here, and inside this, we have a couple of default folders, including our built-ins, our computers, our domain controllers, and so on and so forth. Inside computers, because we already joined a domain or a computer to the domain, we should have our computer for that. And inside of our domain controllers, we should have our domain controller. Inside users, however, all we have as far as users right now is the administrator and a bunch of other default user accounts. So first things first, with Active Directory, the most important aspect of an Active Directory domain controller is planning our organization. Active Directory is a logical and physical representation of your company's hierarchy. So let's say that your company is a car company, right? You want to have different aspects of that car company. For instance, you want sales, marketing, IT, management, factory workers. All of the different aspects of that company need to be listed as part of your organizational structure. And it should be somewhere in some sort of a documentation at the enterprise level, right? Your CEO should have some sort of documentation of who's in charge of who, what, where, how, and why. And that organizational structure should be listed in some way inside your Active Directory structure as well. It doesn't have to be 100% the exact copy. So for instance, you don't need an organizational unit for the CEO because they're the top of the food chain and that's it. That's their organizational unit. However, maybe that's exactly how you want to set it up. Maybe you want it to be set up based off of who's in charge of who. Maybe you want it set up based off of different departments. Maybe you are in a 14-story office building and you have people on each floor of that office building. So you want to set it up based off of the floor. So floor 1, and then so on and so forth. Whatever it is that you're going to set up your organizational units as, you want to make sure that you've planned that out so that it makes sense. From an IT perspective, in the office building scenario, doing it by floor actually makes a lot of sense because that way we know that on the 5th floor in the cubicle on the west side of the office is where the sales manager works, right? So now we can trace our network cables and everything based off of that. But if everything was done by IT standards, it would look a little funny. Realistically, most companies, they set it up based off of whatever company aspects there are. So let's make a couple organizational units. What we're going to do is we're going to come in here into our white space. We're going to click on our Active Directory domain. We're going to right click on it and we're going to come down here to new. And we're going to scroll over here to organizational unit. Now, all an organizational unit is realistically is it's a folder that you can put things in. So just like if you had a filing cabinet at your house, you want those folders to make sense. So we're going to make a sales organizational unit. Now, this here, protect container from accidental deletion. This is actually a really good security aspect for your organizational units. However, because we're in a test environment, we want to check that off because we're probably going to delete some of these somewhere and we don't want this to be protected. So we're going to click that off and we're going to hit OK. And now we have our sales organizational unit. Let's make another one. Let's go into our domain and create marketing organizational unit. And again, make sure you uncheck the protect container from accidental deletion. Now, why do we have these organizational units? Well, first of all, if we come up here to computers, we can see that the sales manager computer is inside of our computers OU. Realistically, you don't want these inside your computer's OU. You want them inside of the OU for the area that they need to be existent on. Because if you want to set up group policies, which we'll talk about later on, based off of sales division, you want to make sure that those group policies are applied to both the computers and the users. So we're going to grab this, just drag and drop this from our computers area into our sales area. And it actually tells us here that moving the object can prevent existing systems from working the way that they're designed, because you're going to create group policies and so on and so forth. We're just going to go ahead and say, yes, we want to move this because right now we don't really have any group policies in place. But now instead of having computers inside of our computers folder, we can see it's inside of our sales folder now. And now we can right click on our sales organizational unit and we can click new and we can create a new user. And when we create this new user, let's call them test user 1. So we've created a first name, a last name, it creates a full name, and now we want to create our user login name, which is going to be test user 1. So we have our full last and first name. We have our user login name, and it creates our pre-2000 login name as well. So now we can click next. And we have to give it a password. So we're just going to type in WCC. And we're going to make it so that they don't have to change it. And we're actually going to make it so that they can't change the password. And we're going to make it so that the password is never expires. And we're going to click next. And we're going to click finish. Uh-oh, something happened. It says that we can't set the password because the password doesn't meet the password requirements. So this is actually another great security feature. It's telling us that we have to have a minimum length and a password complexity and so on and so forth. But what if for some reason we didn't want all of these features? Let's say that, you know, we're in a test environment and we just want to see, you know, small, easy passwords. We can actually set this so that we can create this user with this password. What we can do is we can come down here and search for group policy. group policy management, and we can open this up, and we can expand our forest, expand our domain some more. Whoops. And we can click on our default domain policy, and we can click edit. And click edit. And inside here, we can go to our computer configuration policy, and we can click on policies, and we can go to Windows settings, and we can click on security settings. And we can click on the account policies, and we can click on our password policy. And in here, this is the password policy for the entire domain, what kind of restrictions we have. So for instance, we have our enforced password history. We have our maximum password age, our minimum password age. We have a minimum password length here. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to double click on this, and we're just not going to define the policy. We'll hit apply and hit OK. And it also says that complexity is required. So we're going to open this up, and we're going to not define this policy as well. And hit apply. So both of these are not defined. Now, if we minimize this and we minimize this, we can actually open up a command prompt real quick. And we can type in gp update /force. And what this is going to do is it's going to update our group policy for us so that our computer know that the policy has been changed. And we should be able to click finish now. Nope, doesn't like it. We'll click back real quick. And nope, still doesn't like it. Let's just go ahead and try and make that user again. We'll click on new user, test, user 1, test user 1, click next, WCC, change it so that they can't change it and then it never expires, click next and finish. It still doesn't like that this is set up. It still says that the complexity is wrong. So we're going to go back into our group policy. We'll expand this out again. Edit our default domain policy. Go to computer config, policies, Windows settings, security settings, account policies, password policy. And instead of not defining these, let's go ahead and define them as 0 and define it as disabled. We'll open up our command prompt again. Type in gp update /force. Let that run. Says it was successful. Close out all of this. And we'll click finish. And now notice that it allowed us to create their test user with the WCC password. So great question. Explain why we were able to create that password this time, as opposed to before when we just undefined the group policy. Okay, so now we have our test user created. Now we can come over here to our Windows 10 computer and we can log in. We'll log in as a different user and we'll type in test user1 at ourlastname.com and give it the password WCC. And there we go. We're able to log in with that new user that we created, even though that user isn't in the users folder, it's in the sales folder, organizational unit. So now let's go ahead and come over here to the marketing organization unit that we created, and let's create another user. And we'll name this one marketing user. And we'll give this one a password of CNTPASSWRD. CNTPASSWRD. And again, we'll make it so that they can't change it and that it never expires, and click finish. So now we have our marketing user in our marketing organizational unit, and we have our sales user in our our test user in our sales organizational unit. And our sales user was able to log into our computer. If we come over here again, and we change users, so we sign out, we log back in as marketing, oops, sorry, other user, marketing user at lastname.com. We're able to log in as that person as well. So 2 users inside of 2 different organizational units, and both able to log into a computer that's not inside of the computer's organizational unit either. So if we come back in here to group policy, and we change our settings back, so we edit our default domain policy, and we go to computer configuration, policies, Windows settings, security settings, account policies, password policy, and we change our minimum password length to 7 again, and hit apply, hit close, and we leave our password complexity. We close this. Oops, didn't mean to close that one, but that's okay. And we go to command prompt, and we do a GP update. Policy completed successfully. So we come back over here to our Windows 10 computer, and we log off again, sign out, and we sign back in as our test user. Test user 1 at lastname.com with the password of WCC, and we hit enter. Notice that it wants to log in, and it does. So we have our user here. We changed our password policy. We have our user here, but their password doesn't meet the complexity. The reason that we were still able to log in is because we haven't actually forced the update to occur on the computer. So We can come in here though, and we can click on properties, or sorry, we don't even have to click on properties. We can come up here to reset password, and we can change this password so that it meets the complexity. CNT password, CNT password, and we can actually unlock the account because it says that it was locked because the domain controller's password policies locked it because we logged in with a unsecure password. So now we can actually right click here and we'll just go ahead and restart. And we can log back in as the test user with the new password that we have from before, or that we have on the server, sorry. There we go. And that's just a couple simple tests of the different ways that you can configure your Active Directory. Now notice, sales and marketing, those are newer organizational units, whereas these folders like users and foreign security principles, they don't have the OU symbol in them. These are just built-in containers for things like foreign security principles or computers and so on and so forth. Some other things that you can do as far as creating, you can create a new computer instead of just joining it to the domain. You can actually pre-create a computer inside of your marketing or sales or any other organizational unit. You can create groups. Every user should be a member of specific groups for them. So for instance, test user 1, we named it test user 1. Let's create a new user that actually makes sense for the purpose of what I'm about to say here. So we're going to name one Bob Smith. And the user login name for them is B Smith. Right? Click next. Password doesn't matter because we're not actually going to keep this. So CNT password. Normally, you would make this so that they have to change it at next login. And just click next and click finish. So now we have Bob Smith. Bob Smith, we'll say Bob Smith is the sales manager, okay? So instead of setting up Bob Smith, coming in here to properties and giving him different permissions and group policy settings and stuff like that, instead of doing all of that, what you'd actually want to do is you would want to create a group. So we'll create a new group, and the group name would be Sales Manager. Now, we're going to call this Sales Manager, but we're going to call this Sales Manager DLSG. DLSG stands for Domain Local Security Group. So we're going to go ahead and hit OK. Now we have our group, our Domain Local Security Group, and we're going to make Bob Smith a member of it. So we'll right click on this and we will click on Properties and we'll click on Members of, and we'll click on Members, we'll click Add, and we'll just type in B Smith, check our name. Here it is. We'll hit OK. And now Bob Smith is a member of the sales manager group. Now the sales manager group can be members of other groups and be inside of domains and organizational units. And all of the permissions and all of the properties and everything will be saved to the sales manager group instead of Bob Smith. So that if next week we fire Bob Smith, we don't have to worry about who was he a member of, what was he a member of, what files did he have permissions to, and what did he have access to, and what rights did he have, and we don't have to worry about any of that. All we have to do is move him to the organizational unit for deactivated users. So you create a new organizational unit for deactivated users, and you just take Bob here and you move him down into this deactivated users organizational unit, which again will disable his account and so on and so forth if you set that up properly. And instead of Bob Smith being a member of the sales manager's SG, we can come here to properties, get rid of him from here so we can remove him, and we can add in test user. And now test user, or Francine Wallowitz, is now the sales manager instead of Bob Smith. So it's a much easier, much more organized way of dealing with your users to where you don't have to worry about what rights they have, what permissions or anything, because it's all based off of the role instead of the individual. So there you go. That is Active Directory objects in a nutshell. We can go ahead and finish up with this lab. Make sure that you answer the questions and submit the assignment with the trouble ticket. And as always, please subscribe and like the video because it really does help. Okay, have a great day, and we will see you next week.